Hello, New Mexico, and welcome to another episode of Around the Roundhouse, a podcast featuring the policies, politics, and enthralling personalities of the land of enchantment from our beautiful state capital here in Santa Fe and beyond. My name is Daniel Chacón, and I'm the State House reporter for the Santa Fe New Mexican. In this week's episode, we're continuing our series of interviews with Santa Fe's mayoral candidates ahead of the November election. Our guest is Ron Trujillo, a former city councilor and retired Department of Transportation employee with the state of New Mexico. Mr. Trujillo, who spent 12 years on the city council, ran for mayor unsuccessfully in 2018, finishing second to Santa Fe's current mayor, Alan Weber. Ron, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Daniel. Muchísimas gracias.
So let's kick things off with why you're running for mayor.
Well, I love this town, Daniel. I love my city. I love the people here. Born and raised here. That to me is something that I hold dear to my heart. That I can call myself a Santa Vecino. I've just seen over the last 8 years what's happened to our community. I've heard from people, and being retired these last 8 years has allowed me to step back from when I was on the city council and working to see exactly the issues that are pertain to this community, be it potholes not being filled, late audits, these are things that are crucial for our city to maintain its status as the capital city of the state of New Mexico. And when you see a lot of these issues that are pertaining to our city that aren't getting done, and it's all because of what's happening at City Hall, I consider it's a lack of leadership. And that is something that definitely I want to bring, leadership and that respect back to the mayor's office.
Based on other interviews that I've read or seen you do, it seems as though your focus is really on going back to basics.
It's always been about basic services. My whole thing is when I was on the council, it was dealing with, I ran on the parks. Being a coach, being a referee at that time, I saw the disarray that the parks had gone into. The previous council decided to, because we were in a drought. I do understand, situations, but they let a lot of the parks here in Santa Fe dry up, go dead. When I was out there with my kids practicing, it was a dangerous situation, something I would not want to, do. And the funny thing about it, here, yes, I complained about it a lot. I had conversations with our city councilors. A lot of times it wasn't getting done, and it wasn't until, my wife, Amber, told me, Ronnie, you need to put up or shut up. And, you've been talking about running for city council. Maybe now's the time. And at the time too, I still was a full-time employee at the NMDOT. So those are the things I had to make sure that I could balance. And, I did balance them. I balanced them very well. Was able to meet with constituents, during my lunch breaks, after work, on weekends. And we did a lot of good when I was on the city council. We, there was a lot of good that we did here in the community. And, I want to just bring that, I want this city to be proactive, not reactive, and that's what I see a lot happening, throughout the city. It's just about constant maintenance, constant, making sure that potholes are fixed, making sure that medians are cleaned. We're the capital city, the state of New Mexico. We don't look like one. So we sure as heck don't act like one. Under my leadership, Santa Fe will start looking and acting like one.
Ron, before we get too far, you're kind of a known commodity in Santa Fe as a native son and a longtime public servant. But for people who don't know you, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, and your professional career path.
Okay, well, born here in Santa Fe back in 1968. That seems like a long time ago now. My parents are Edwina Marie Montoya Trujillo, and my father was Onesimo Mus Trujillo Sr. And fortunately, I lost him when I was 19. He succumbed to cancer at 48. But attended Kearney, De Vargas, and then Santa Fe High School. Played football and baseball for the Demons. Went on to the community college. Got my basics out of the way. I then went to New Mexico State, and I was, my degree was going to be civil engineering, and I was working towards that. That's when my father, took ill And you know what? When I came back, I just that thing of going, at the time I just felt, I needed to come back and, start my career working here. I had worked for the NMDOT previously, um, as a summer aide. So that's where I get the 25 plus years of service. And, and during that time when I was back here, I met my wife, Amber, and the funny thing is we met at a political party. so politics has always been part of my family. I say my mom and dad, proud Kennedy Democrats, my grandparents, proud FDR Democrats, and that's where, I got a lot of my upbringing, and my values, um, my father's dad, my grandpa Trujillo, had a farm in Chimayo. So, it was a working farm. We had animals, we had an apple orchard. So, and I'm an only child. I don't have siblings. So when it was me, my dad, my grandpa working the farm. So I know what hard work is. People say, when you pick hundreds and hundreds of bushels of apples over your lifetime, and working the farm, planting. My grandfather used to plant chili up in Truchas because we have property up there. I still have that piece of property, and we used to keep, the cow up there, that we would, at the end of the year we'd butcher, so that was my life in there. But like I said, when I met Amber, we dated, then we got married. We have two beautiful children, Hunter and Christiana. Who have now graduated, from college. They're starting their careers. Christiana is actually going into medical school now. So very proud of of my children, my wife. We built a really good life here in Santa Fe. And that's what I try to tell people. Santa Fe is a wonderful and a great place. To bring up a family. I just think there's got to be a few more things that we can tweak in this city, for quality of life. That's what it's all about. Like you mentioned, my whole thing is about quality of life, bringing things here to the city that for people. Oh, you want to talk about my career? Yes, I worked for the New Mexico Department of Transportation for 25 plus years. I started off as a highway aide, working construction, doing odds, inspecting things. Then I became a highway inspector. And so I did a lot of projects here a few projects here in Santa Fe that were state roads. The biggest project that I got to work on was the Ottaway project, which was the second phase of the WIP going up to Los Alamos. So we did that whole section from Powake High School all the way past the bridge. So I did a lot of the concrete work on the Ottaway Bridge. So very proud of that project. Every time I drive up to Los Alamos, I brag about it. I said, I worked on this project. It was fun. At the DOT, there's a ladder that employees are able to climb, and with that, after that, I after an inspector, I became the local government road fund coordinator. I oversaw, distributing funds, state, federal funds to counties, cities, pueblos, schools. Did that. I was also the Adopt a Highway coordinator. So that comes into, will help me out, when we're doing the medians, because we're going to revamp all the medians here in Santa Fe, make them beautiful, make them, so that, people here in Santa Fe can be proud of their city when they drive into it. After that, I went to the bridge maintenance section. At the bridge maintenance section, I oversaw all the heavy loads coming to the state, which permitting, making sure that, heavy loads wouldn't damage our bridges. Did that for many years, and then came back to the Fleet Management Bureau as the analyst. Did that for a few years, and then I got promoted to the line manager, where we oversaw the purchasing, disposal of all the vehicles and equipment for the NMDOT, which is the state's largest fleet. So, and then in 2018, I did run for mayor, and after that, I retired, and I've been retired now since the end of 2018. So, and enjoying retirement. But like I said, retirement has allowed me to, see a lot of issues that have pertained to this city, things that aren't working, things, that need to get done. And like I said, my passion for this community makes me want to know I can make those changes. We can hire the right people that can make those changes as well, and make Santa Fe, the city, the city it should be, the city that all Santa Vecinos can be proud of.
Ron, as you mentioned, you ran for mayor in 2018. What's going to be different this time around? What are you doing different this time around?
Well, not so much different. We're still going out. We're meeting people. I think people have seen what's happened here in the city of Santa Fe. They've seen what, unfortunately, this administration has done. It's sad that it's come to this, but I think people here in Santa Fe now see that you need somebody with a passion, that knows this community, that knows the cultures, that knows city government, that knows any type of government, and how you run a city. That's the unfortunate thing, I think, with this administration, and unfortunately this mayor too. They did not know what they were getting into, and unfortunately, the city's in the situation it is, and it's going to take a little while for it to get back to where it was. And I'm ready to tackle that, but I want the citizens of Santa Fe to know it's not going to happen overnight. This is a process. We didn't get into this mess overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. But given if I'm given that opportunity to be the next mayor, we are going to get out of it. And like I said, Santa Fe will flourish as the capital city of the state of New Mexico.
It seems like every week there's another person joining the mayor's race. We're up to 8, if I'm not mistaken. Who do you think is your biggest competition?
Well, when they did that little straw poll a few weeks, I guess a month ago, and like I said, looking at what happened there, it showed Michael at 15, me at 13, and everybody else pretty much at 3% and all that. So it's probably going to be I'd say Michael, he is well known. He's a current city council. He has challenged the mayor on some issues, so but like I said, I think everybody that's running, you have a passion for your community, and that's a good thing. And so it's going to be an interesting campaign. It's going to be interesting when voting, because of course we do have the ranked choice voting, and back when I ran, there were, I think, 5 of us. Now with 8, I mean, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting because within that block of voting, and I think we talked about this before, there are parts where we're going to be splitting votes. We all have that base. We all know each other here in Santa Fe. We all have the same friends. We all have the same colleagues. So that's going to be the thing, is going out to the voters. The thing that I try to tell all the voters, go to my website. You can see what I've done, what I plan on doing. I have a track record, and it's a pretty darn good track record. My time, as a city councilor, and that's I think the voters just have to get, they need to know who their candidates are, know what they've done, what they plan on doing. They need to educate themselves on the candidates and their platforms.
I did want to go a little bit deeper on the topic that you just brought up, which is the possibility of a certain number of candidates splitting the vote. And there are many who believe in Santa Fe that you, and as you mentioned earlier, Councilor Michael Garcia and former City Councilor Joanne Vigil Koppler share the same constituency. Do you worry that you'll split the vote and that Santa Fe will elect another mayor in the vein of Alan Weber versus, Larry Delgado?
Well, yeah, I think that goes through all our minds. In fact, I've talked to constituents. Last night, I was even on the Plaza. We went for the Concert 45, and people were coming up to me, and and some people were telling me that that's going to be the unfortunate thing, Ron, is if you Mike, Joanne, we split the vote, then somebody else gets elected, and we just don't want that fiasco to happen. And the thing that I tell people, well, the first thing, you need to vote. You need to get out there and vote. I've been telling people, pretend it's the sugar tax. The truth. People came out for the sugar tax. Pretend. Treat this election like it's the sugar tax, and definitely make your voice heard. And it's like I said, ranked choice voting. I can't tell you how to vote. On our website, we're telling people, ranked choice voting is here. I tell them, use it. How you feel it should be used. But at the same time, too, I think, again, too, the education on that. A lot of people are still not crazy about ranked choice voting. So a lot of people need to get educated on how it works and how it's done. So those are the things that my campaign, even on our website, we're showing people how it can be done. We're using food. to so that people can, a little bit easier people to understand. And, I'm telling people, if I'm not your first choice, I sure as heck want to be your second choice. If I'm not your second choice, I want to be your third choice. I think that's what all candidates will be vying for, is that number 1, 2, and 3.
But I mean, but wouldn't it work to your advantage to just tell voters to just vote for you?
Yes, yes, it can. But again, too, is, if you just vote for one and then say I would have been on somebody else's ballot, the second ballot, once you're eliminated, you're done. I don't plan on getting eliminated. I plan on winning this. I know so yeah, you can use that. Like I said, we are just trying to educate the people here in Santa Fe as to how ranked choice voting works.
Ron, there is an effort underway to possibly scale back the powers of the mayor under the strong mayor system. Do you support the changes that the council is talking about?
Well, there's some changes that are happening, Daniel, but I think what's happened is, unfortunately, with this mayor came into the office and has tried to turn this the city of Santa Fe's mayor's office into the presidency. He created a bubble over it, and that's not what the strong mayor, was supposed to be. The strong mayor was to, help out your city manager, take more of an initiative in, day-to-day the functions, and that's not what's happening, under this mayor. So I think this is a bad example as to why some of these things should be done. I think, if you get a mayor in there that understands his role as a strong mayor and has more day-to-day, interaction with the city manager, with all the departments, some of these things might not, need to be done. One of the initiatives they're talking about as well is only giving the mayor, a veto, to vote in case there's a tie. I'm sorry, not a veto, in case there's a tie. Well, I totally am against that, because, I believe that a mayor, you need to know exactly what his thoughts are on all issues here. We used to sit back when we was on the council. I've gone through both of them. The mayor not voting and the mayor, voting, and there'd be a lot of times when we'd make decisions, and a lot of people weren't happy with that. And that's understandable. You're going to make some people happy. You're going to make others, happy as well. The thing about it is, the mayor, you would just sit back and not have to, worry about it. That's why we actually made it a fact that the mayor needs to vote. The constituents deserve to know how the mayor of Santa Fe feels about an issue. And so I'm glad, and that's something I hope that they keep, because I believe that, like I said, the mayor of Santa Fe needs to, be, needs to show his vote, needs to let the constituents here in Santa Fe know how he feels on all issues that pertain to the city government, and, any issue that comes before the city council.
Ron, the mayor is allowed to pick his or her city manager, basically. What do you think about the current city manager, Mark Scott? Would you be open to keeping him on staff should you be elected mayor?
Well, that's the whole thing, is we're going to go in there with a forensic audit. We're going to do a forensic audit on all the departments. I want to see what's working, what's not working. These are the things, yes, the mayor gets to choose a city manager. These are things that we will be sitting down with all the employees. That's one thing I want to make it very clear, is when we go have this forensic audit, when we go talk to the different departments, we're going to have that open door policy where we want to talk to the employees, because the employees know what's happening. The employees know what's working, what's not working, what they need, what they might not need. So this is the whole thing. We're going to come in there. I'm a very approachable person, and that's the thing we want. The employees here at the city of Santa Fe to know that I'm going to be a mayor that you can come up to me, you can talk to me. We're going to have an open door policy. If you're at City Hall, come talk to me, because I want to hear from you. I want to know what's going on. Again, we have to evaluate. We have to evaluate every department, and every department head as to what's going to happen. This is just with any turnover in any administration.
Councilor, I want to talk a little bit about your we spoke about your retirement, and it brings me to a question that I wanted to ask you. When Santa Fe County Commissioner Justin Green announced his mayoral bid, he said that some candidates were retired and, quote unquote, just passed their due date. Although he didn't mention any names, he was obviously including you in that category. What would you tell Commissioner Green if he was sitting here today?
Well, we had that discussion. You even called me on it. I made the quote that, there's no expiration on caring for the city of Santa Fe. That's why I'm running for mayor. I love this community. I love our city. Chacon, I'm proud to say that I was elected, to 3 4-year terms, and I fulfilled those 4-year terms. 12 years I gave to the city of Santa Fe as a city councilor. Um, it's disheartening when I see Commissioner Green, who's only barely was elected 2 years ago, wanting to leave his elected position for a higher office. When you get elected, you're technically signing a contract with your constituents saying, thank you for voting for me. I appreciate it. I am going to represent you to the best of my ability for these next 4 years. And when you see, some candidates say that, well, there's bigger and better. I'm gonna leave you. That's disheartening because, I when I ran, I made a commitment to my constituents for 4 years, fulfill those 4 years, and fortunately, I was reelected, 2 more terms, and something that I'm very proud of. And I just think you need to fulfill your commitment to your constituents.
Okay. Let's talk about your time on the city council and kind of the decision that was happening at that time to use parks bond money to pay for salaries and dipping into the water fund to pay for day-to-day operations. Was that the right approach, and why did you allow that to happen?
Okay, was it the right approach? The thing about it, when we were having the discussion with the Parks Fund, and I initiated the Parks Fund. That's what I ran on. We got it passed. You got a $30 million, from the voters to revamp all the parks. When we started having discussion, our city manager, our lawyers, they came to us and said that this was allowable and feasible, for us to do. So we took directions from them. Um, for me to tell, I was on top of our parks, especially in District 4, all the time, because like I said, I initiated this. I wanted to ensure that the funding went to the right places, went to the right parks, ensuring that day-to-day construction was followed, and a timely manner that it got done. So am I happy with what happened? Yes, I'm happy because the parks got revamped. That was my goal on when I ran for city council at the time, was to revamp our parks, and they did. Yes, we came to find out later on that this shouldn't have been done. And we fixed that. We understood the mistake that was made, but at the time, like, we were going off what was being told by our city manager and by our city attorney, that this was feasible and this was allowable.
And did anybody push back on that idea?
I don't think there wasn't really a lot of pushback on it at the time, because I think pretty much you saw the disarray that the parks were in, and you heard the outcry from the citizens here in Santa Fe as well. Our parks are not places we want to go to because they feel unsafe. They wanted to see our parks revamped. And there was even issues in my district where parks should have been built back in the days when subdivisions, and they weren't. We actually built Las Estancias and Dr. Martin Luther King Park because at the time, back in the days when these subdivisions came, a park was promised, and it never came to fruition. With that park spot, we were able to build these little small pocket parks, which today are still being used. I run into people who live there, back when their children were very tiny, and they tell me, Ron, I said, we're grateful that you did that. That park is still there. New families have moved into these subdivisions, and they're still using these parks. So that makes me feel great. That makes me feel good. That's what the only thing that's unfortunate. It seems like after I left the council, the parks went back into disarray again. You see Franklin Miles. We worked our butt to get that park revamped. Regal Park as well. Regal Park is still, pretty much shining well, but you have all these other parks throughout the city. Some are not maintained, some are not watered. This is something that I'm definitely going to be keeping track of under as mayor. And who's not to say we might not go after another bond issue? We don't know yet. These are the whole things we need to look at. We, like I said, we do an evaluation of our parks as well. That comes in the forensic audit as to what needs to be done. Irrigation system. There's a lot of things happening in this community. It's not just one park. But again, too, is one thing I've always said. We treat every part of Santa Fe equally, and that includes our parks, and that will happen under my administration.
And let me make sure I understood you correctly. You would be open to the idea of another bond issue.
Yes, of course. I'm open to having discussion on how we can do different things, because the thing about it, my administration has been very. I've always been a very transparent person, But again, too, my whole campaign is dealing with collaboration. You need to bring all the stakeholders to the table, have those discussions. We're going to have those meetings. If we were to go that process of bond issue, we would definitely go out to the public, explain to what's happening, get their input. That to me, that's what's not happening here in this community and at City Hall. Dialogue's not taking place. Back when I was on the council, we used to have talks with our county commissioners. I had those relationships with our county commissioners. I had those relationships with our state legislatures. It just seems that those relationships aren't what they used to be. And I think that's why we all need to be on the same page with the county, the city, the county, the state, and the federal government as well. So those are things that I definitely want to, have quarterly meetings between the county, the state, federal. We need to know what's going on, and we need to keep the public informed as to what issues are, pertain to the city and what's being done to fix those issues. And that's where transparency comes in, and that's what my administration is going to be all about, is, letting the people here in Santa Fe know where their money is, where it's going to, so there's no, hiccups or, people all, wow, I can't believe the city spent this type of money on that. People are going to know what's happening under my administration.
Ron, I don't want to bring up a sore subject, but it might be one. When I came back to Santa Fe, one of the first stories that I covered was the children's fishing derby along the river. What happened to the derby? That was your baby.
That was my baby. Yeah, that was my baby. You know what? When Mayor Koss, when we started talking about the living river, Mayor Koss, that was one of his initiatives. And one of the things that I told him, I said, well, Mayor, what's more better to be in a living river than having fish, and the city had prior years that they had fishing derbies, but it was never, memorialized in a resolution. So I ensured that I passed the resolution, stated that that on the free fishing day that the city would have a fishing derby, for the children here in Santa Fe. What better place to catch your first fish than in the Santa Fe River? You can say, hey, I caught my first fish in my hometown river. Well, it was going perfect. And during that time, even in the resolution, I put that years of drought, we would not have it, because of course I have to be accountable to the citizens of Santa Fe with their water and all that. But if there were, the flows were good, we would have it. Under this administration, I think they've only had it once. And the excuse I got from the City Hall, the mayor's office, the mayor, flows are too fast. But yet you go out there and it's a trickle of water. And the thing that I told them is, you do realize that, we can regulate the flows up at the reservoir. So we know exactly, what's coming down, and, CFI that's happening in the river. So, it was a crock of what, the excuses they're giving me. I hear it all the time from residents. Ron, when's the fishing derby happening? I said, I can't tell you. That's a decision that has to be made at City Hall. And, and it is disheartening. And I wish some of the city councilors would have taken upon themselves, to say, hey, this is a good thing for this community. This is about community. The Saturday that we'd have the fishing derby, families would come out, picnics. We would have guides there showing kids how to fly fish. It was just a fun day. And the funny thing too is sometimes there would be tourists that were walking on with kids, and they would say, "Can I fish?" Sure, come on. This is what makes Santa Fe such a unique, place. So definitely, when I'm mayor, the fishing derby is going to return.
Okay.
I can make that a promise.
Ron, I want to get into a pretty serious issue here in Santa Fe, and that is lack of affordable housing. Can you give us some specific ideas of how you would bring about affordable housing to a community that, there are so many people that work here but can't afford to live here? So what are some specific ideas that you would bring forward to generate more affordable housing in this community?
Okay, well, Chacón, one of the biggest issues we've always had is defining affordability. What's affordable to you may not be affordable to me. What's affordable to that person, that's the whole thing. We've never done that. People build it. Contractors build houses here. It's affordable, $300,000, $200,000. That's not affordable. When I was on the council, we had purchased the Northwest Quadrant. And that was a promise that we were going to make to the people in Santa Fe, that nothing but affordable housing was going to be on that tract of land. Well, it seems like after I got off the council, nothing came to fruition of it. I started hearing that the council started selling off portions of that property. That's the thing that I want to look at now, as we come in with this forensic audit, as to what parcels of land are still available on the Northwest Quadrant, because that's a promise we made to this community to build affordable housing. That it's something that's, we've been talking about affordable housing for the last 20-30 years, and it's unfortunate, but it's just also the city we live in. Our city is so world renowned, and prices just keep getting, higher and higher. I mean, when you look at, prices, we can all say, Canyon Road used to be nothing but, Santa Fecinos. And, you look at these houses, that have now turned into galleries, selling for millions and millions of dollars. So that's the whole thing. And a lot of our affordable housing has come down to the south side of Santa Fe, with Las Solares and all that. But the thing about it is what's happening, I see around that part, especially like where Presbyterian is all you're seeing is, people are even telling me, Ron, all we're seeing are apartments. I don't see affordable housing, being built. Again, too, Chacón, that's where we bring people to the table. We bring the stakeholders to the table. We bring the HomeWise. We bring anybody that's dealing with affordable housing, building houses, to the table. So we have those discussions, and we need to have those discussions, not only, here in the city, with the county as well, the state as well. This is not just a Santa Fe issue. It's a county and a state issue. But if you don't bring people to the table, start having those discussions and dialogues of where this affordable housing is going to be built, how it's going to be paid for. So before we even start, doing that, we need to bring the stakeholders to the table to have those tough discussions. But I want to see affordable housing. I want our kids living here. I want our police and fire department, living here. We talked about with our fire department, police. Back when I was on council, there was an issue we wanted to do, was we wanted to purchase some of these houses that were for sale. Have an inventory here in the city of Santa Fe that would allow our first responders to live there at a lower, rate for rent. So they were able to, to get money, save money, so that eventually they could build or buy a house, and stay here in Santa Fe. That's the whole thing, is that, we want our police, our firefighters to start their career here in Santa Fe. We want them to end their career here in Santa Fe, and we want them to be able to live here. And, but a lot of things also factor into that. Our schools, quality of life. And sometimes you see that happening, that a lot of these, our people that were born and raised here, they're moving on to Albuquerque, they're moving on to Rio Rancho, other outlying cities where, yes, it is cheaper, to live. And that's the whole thing, is, we have to make sure that, Santa Fe is a city that, that is affordable. That's, we've been like I said, that's been dialogue that we've been trying to, get through for 20-30 years. And yes, we have parcels of property we can look at, within the city. And again, we need to make sure that we do build that affordable housing, because we want our workforce, living here. We want people, staying here in Santa Fe.
Do you think that we should keep or that Santa Fe should keep its fee in lieu of provision?
That's the hard part. The thing is, if it's a small project, I was fine with that. But on these bigger projects, no. You need to build the houses. One of the issues that really bugged me a lot of times is when developers were coming to the city, and when they would talk about, well, where are they affordable? Where are you putting the affordable houses? Well, right here in this little section here, this calle, that's where all the affordable houses are. I didn't like that. I said, in order to make a community, in order to make a subdivision, you put one affordable house on that street, another affordable house on this street, and even it's by $300,000, $400,000 house, you put one of those affordable houses next to that. That's what creates a community. You can't just have all the affordable houses on one street. That's just not the way a subdivision or a community should work. So those are the things that when I was on the council, I wouldn't vote for something like that. And I would tell them, the developers, no, I'm not going to go for something like that. That to me is, you're just making sure that the affordable houses, those people are living on this street. No. Put it throughout the subdivision, because that's what makes a community.
Ron, a question that I've been asking all the mayoral candidates, and I know you have strong opinions about it. The obelisk that got torn down some years ago. What, if you were mayor, what would you want to push forward as it relates to the obelisk?
Well, history is very important to me here in this community. Culture is very important. As you know, I portrayed Don Diego de Vargas for the fiestas in 1994. I'm a life member of the Caballeros de Vargas as well. I'm proud of our city, our heritage. An unfortunate event happened that day where the obelisk, the soldiers monument, was torn down, and we all know the scenario as to why it happened. I won't go into that detail, but I can tell, and I will tell the people here in Santa Fe that we will rebuild it. I'm not pulling any punches on that. It's our history. You can't deny our history. But again, Chacón, we need to bring people to the table, not just one group. That's what happened. Only one group was invited to sit with the mayor and a few councilors, so only their voice was heard. You have to bring all stakeholders, all voices to the table. I have an idea on if I was to have, when the obelisk is rebuilt, again, having that dialogue, bringing people to the table. I want to bring our Native American brothers and sisters. I want to bring our Hispanic cultures. I want to bring our Anglo cultures to the table, and all cultures that now call Santa Fe home. The reason I want to do is, when we're rebuilding it, I want to leave the cracks. I want the cracks to stay in there, because that is now part of Santa Fe's history. I said, but when I speak with our Native American brothers and sisters, what would you want to put into those cracks to fill it? I don't know. It could be Macacia pottery. It could be turquoise. I don't know. That's why we have the thing. So we fill in that section of the obelisk cracked with that. I move on to the Hispanic culture. Adobe is using our building block. Do we put adobe in there? Again, we have that dialogue. I go to the Anglo. It could be wood. It could be steel. I don't know. That's why you have that dialogue. What are we going to put in there to fill in those cracks? Then you come to the fourth panel. You look at all the cultures that now call Santa Fe home. You talk with those individuals and say, what is your building block? So within that section, we put every other new culture that has come into that building block until we get to the top, and we leave it blank for the future. But we rebuild it. And then you look at what Santa Fe has come from: Native American, Hispanic, Anglo, to look at all the cultures that call Santa Fe home. And that's what makes Santa Fe unique. We are such a multicultural city. And that's the whole thing. It comes with respect. And that respect is going to be bringing people to the table, having those dialogues. Maybe not everybody's going to agree with me. But again, too, I will not deny our history. I think had that dialogue taken place in the first place, the Soldiers Monument would still be standing. The Vargas would still be in Cathedral Park. These are the things we need to do. And yes, we will have dialogue as to what, the plaques say. I agree, there were derogatory, wording on there that has no place in this. But again, too, you have to understand, it's a different time in history. You see that, and with anything, but like I said, you respect history. One of the quotes I've always loved is by Winston Churchill. A country that forgets its history, has no future. And that's something that that's what makes Santa Fe unique. When people come here, visitors, whatever, they want to see that, how it's said, walking back in time. We as Santa Fe have been able to preserve our culture, our history, and it thrives. And that's the thing that I want to continue. I want to show respect for all cultures.
Okay. Ron, I was on your website and have been visiting your website just to prepare for this interview. And I sense that you're giving me some competition with a podcast called Ronversations.
Yes, sir.
You've had an interesting mix of guests. Why did you decide to do Ronversations podcast?
We had this discussion with my wife and my daughter. And we had discussing during this campaign, what do we want to do? We want issues that pertain to our city to be spoken about. Because if it's not talked about, then nothing will get done. So yes, I brought on I've always wanted to promote Santa Fe as a high altitude training place. You have Colorado Springs at 5,000 something. Well, you have Santa Fe at 7,000. I had a long distance runner, Lamec, who actually ran in the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro as my first guest, and we had discussion on why he considered Santa Fe the greatest place to train. For his upcoming events. Again, that's how you promote Santa Fe. Those are the ideas you get from people who actually use it. I then had, I've sent out an invitation to all governor candidates to come on. I've had Sam Bregman on there. We discussed about crime, issues, like that. I had Greg Hull, who is running on the Republican side. So mine's not nonpartisan. Anybody can come on. I want the issues to come out as it pertains to the city of Santa Fe, as it pertains to within the county, the state. I've had police former police chief Eric Johnson and his brother Gary, detective, on. I just did a podcast 2 days ago with Sheriff Don Mendoza. So again, too, I just want to bring out the issues that pertain and how that collaboration between state, county, city is going to work under my administration. Now, I'm not trying to give you any competition on your, I don't, you can name yours. I don't know, yours is Chacón around the Roundhouse. Yes. We came up with a key thing, Ronversations, but it's been neat because I've been able to talk to these my guests, and, it's called Ronversations Unfiltered. And that's what I like about it. We bring out the issues, we talk about issues, and again, too, it pertains to the city, and it's nice because, I'm hearing from professionals. I'm hearing from the people. Like if I was to interview you, we'd be talking about, all the stuff that you deal with in government reporting and all that. That's the conversation I would have. And I'm offering you an invitation if you want to come on to Ronversations. There's the invitation. But it has been fun. I mean, I think you have fun with this, with your podcast. I would listen to your podcast. It's great. And I'm glad that you're listening to it. And I invite people here in Santa Fe, visit my website, www.ronaldtrujillo, the number 4 mayor2025.com, and you can see my podcast, and you can see what I've done and what I plan to do, and the good things, the good changes that are going to come to this community when I'm mayor.
All right. Well, Ron, I know Fiesta's coming up, so I'm guessing that I'll see you out in the community. So thank you so much for being our guest today. And thank you to our viewers and listeners for joining Around the Roundhouse. Join us every week as we talk to newsmakers in the political realm by subscribing through Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. For the latest development, follow our coverage online at SantaFeNewMexican.com, where you can also subscribe to our political newsletter, The Roundhouse Report. Until next time, I'm Daniel Chacón, and this has been Around the Roundhouse.